Yo, 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 what's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to yet again another fantastic indie creator interview. It is your Caped Crusader, Cody, and we are keeping it geekly with our brand new friend, Alan Russette. We're here to break down his latest 3 issues of Project Impact and everything in between. Alan, welcome to the stream. How's everything going across the pond for you? Is it considered across the pond, or like what is that? Up north?
Well, it's a lake, you know. That's we're across the lake from each other. So yeah, that's, we are part of the Great White North. So it's yeah. How's everything in the warm south for you? I guess.
Oh man, today was a rough one. We had expensive car repair, and then I left my phone in my car. So I got home. I was like, oh god, I can't find my phone. Went to get my phone, left my wallet there. So I spent like an hour looking for my wallet at the house. Then got my wallet, left the car keys there. I'm like, dude, what else? I'm going to be losing my brain here if I don't get away from this place. But, you know, very excited for this interview. And man, I had the opportunity to read the first 2 issues, and then we're going to have a special chance to look at the first couple of pages of issue 3. So very excited. But before we get to that, first and foremost, Alan, you know, who are you and how did you get into creating comics?
Okay. Well, by day, I am a substitute teacher and academic. Up until, well, over the last, decade, I guess, I've been doing graduate studies in applied linguistics. So I have November 2020, I finished my PhD in applied linguistics. So that's,
wow. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. So that's, dealt with there. But in my regular day-to-day life, I do substitute teaching and or regular classroom teaching. That's I spent most of last year, from November till June, in a grade 4 French immersion classroom as their homeroom teacher and things. And we're gearing up for September, and we're seeing how things are going to shake out. As far as comics go, there was a bit of a resurgence in the Canadian indie scene around 2015, 2016, when Chapter House Comics, I'm not sure if you've heard of them. They've since rebranded to Lev Gleason Presents Comics.
Okay.
And well, at the time, again, they were the only large-scale Canadian publisher, and they had acquired the rights to Captain Canuck, who is one of the longer-standing Canadian superheroes, independent Canadian superheroes. He predates Guardian from the X-Men by about a year or 2.
Holy crap!
Yeah. So
that's pretty big, right? That was pretty big for them to get the rights.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So they got that, and it was around that time that there seemed to be like a real uptick in the output. There was a series like Auric of the Great White North. There's another one, what was it? Big Nick. There's another series actually called North. A variety of just like high quality things popping up, and I started looking at some of these Facebook groups, and there was this banner that was showing all of these different prominent indie comics figures or characters, not figures, characters. And I started thinking to myself, well, you know what? Why can't my characters be up there too? So that kind of got me going, and I decided to start, hammering away on the script. And then once I got my script sort of narrowed out, I started talking here and there to artists to sort of see if I can actually, bring this to life. And well, that's, I guess, sort of the impetus of how we got things going.
No, that's so cool. If I remember correctly, I think I read something about some tabletop RPG kind of motivated you as well.
Yep, that's the one of the characters that appears in all 3 issues, but he figures more prominently in issue 2. Pulsar, who's the team leader. He actually had his original origins in the old Marvel Superheroes Face Rip game that I used to play with my cousins.
Oh, that's awesome.
The 80s and 90s. So he was very much sort of set in stone. And truth be told, every single one of the characters that is in any of these issues have their own game stats already. So I gave them game stats before I even put the first word on page, because I wanted to sort of get an idea of who they were, what they could do, how good were they relative to their opponents and or patriots, and just sort of built it from there. So there is actually still a pretty prominent gaming community around the Marvel Superheroes Face Rip version by TSR. Even though the game's been out of print since I guess 92, there is still a pretty vibrant community there. So in theory, I could use my team in any one of their game sessions, and
That's
they would do
awesome.
just fine.
No, I really like how you created like stats and power levels for them. I mean, in issue 2, we see 2 of them in a training simulation, like go head to head. So, I mean, I'm sure that made it a little bit easier for you to kind of figure out how this fight was going to end up.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, that's like I think from just a purely game level, the damsel character would probably wipe the floor with him, with Seism. But I wanted to sort of demonstrate a couple things. I wanted to demonstrate, one, the sheer destructive power of what he would be capable of doing with his sort of earth control related powers.
Mhm.
But I also wanted to show his tactical prowess and just sort of show that the intangibles that would have come along with who he is as a character, and how he could be like a match for, again, 2 of the heavier hitters on the team. Just again using his powers to their maximum.
One thing we were talking backstage as well, having the chance to read the first 2 issues, which anyone who is watching, you can read the first 2 issues for free on Global Comics. Is there anywhere else that it's available to read?
Well, let's see. They could also, let's see. They could get it on. It's available for purchase both through Drive-Through Comics as well. Like if you want the PDF of your very own, then Global Comics, Drive-Through Comics. The first 2 issues had been available on Comixology prior to the big transfer of all the digital things and when they did that merger of Comixology and Kindle Direct Publishing, and the fiasco that all created. So they were available there, the first 2 issues. So there are people who purchased it there that can still read it there. I haven't gone through the hoops to be able to make them available on Comixology again. But yeah, at this point, Drive-Through Comics and Global Comics are the main ones. And Global Comics at this point is where we've been focusing a lot of our energy, because they've been just an outstanding platform.
No,
As I'm sure
absolutely.
you've noticed.
Yeah. And man, I loved just you kind of put a different spin on superheroes than what I'm typically used to when reading. Like you really gave them like a personality outside of being a hero, like what their lives were outside of, the main duty. One of them even, he's kind of like stuck behind a desk doing, being the dispatcher, and you could tell he wants to, he wanted more. And I really thought it was awesome how much like emotion you put into that. So man, I gotta ask, like, what was some of your inspirations for creating this, like when creating all these different characters?
Well, okay, so I like to play around a lot with words and language. With, again, the background in applied linguistics, I like to play with words a lot. And the Seism character that you mentioned there, like that's his storyline for issue 2 actually came about because of the way issue 1 came together. Essentially, when I was putting everything together, ultimately, the Pulsar character that I mentioned, he was the last addition to the team, because I started thinking, well, like in terms of, like if I wanted a character that was going to essentially be like the entry point or the sort of the guide into the world, the one whose voice I knew best was his, because he's been around, in my brain basically since the 80s and 90s.
Mhm.
And so he became a natural sort of addition. And the end result was I had seven members on the team, and that's a lot of characters to juggle. And so I made it a point to try and make sure that I was giving everybody their moment in issue 1. And I realized by the time I was done that Seism really didn't do anything. And I thought, okay, well, he's there and he's just kind of hanging out.
Mm-hmm.
That I can work with that. So I decided, okay, well, I'm going to build off of that and sort of build up his natural sort of, I guess, a little bit aspects about his character. Who is he as a character, and what might this do to him in terms of being like a major, former special forces operator, and all of a sudden being shelved, right? What's that going to do for his ego and his general disposition? And so when I was bringing things into issue 2, I wanted to make sure that I gave him his moments that he didn't get in issue 1.
Mm-hmm.
So I really pushed that. Now, like in terms of the character creation itself, well, the name Seism, okay, you've heard of like seismology, right? The study of earthquakes.
Mm-hmm.
Seismic is an adjective that gets used quite a bit. Well, I realized, well, with something like, again, like an adjective like seismic, it's going to have a root, right? So I looked back to see if there was a root, to that, and seism itself is an Old English word for earthquake. So I thought, okay,
That's
well,
awesome. That works
nobody's used that,
perfect.
so boom, yeah, take that. So I grabbed that. When I looked at some of the other characters, the Polar Knight character, I had been playing around with sort of ideas, and it had occurred to me at one point that they're like, are you familiar with the idea of the midnight sun?
Hmm.
Where, like, again, you've got, like, again, daylight for 24 hours for like six
Yeah.
to 8 months or whatever like that. I thought, well, if there's a midnight sun, then there has to be an opposite, and that opposite would be polar night. So I then played around with that a little bit to come up with, the like, instead of night, the conventional night with an N, just night as in knight in armor sort of idea. So that's where that came from. Moose, I had thought, well, you know what? There are a variety of sort of big strapping characters whose nickname end up being Moose sort of thing. So, but there's nobody really in like superhero comics that goes by that moniker.
Hmm.
Let's make a big strong guy who's kind of my answer to the Ben Grimm Thing character. Call him Moose, and I just sort of was going like that with Damsel. I figure, like, if you close your eyes and you imagine, like what sort of images come to mind when you think of the word damsel, right? You're going to have very distinct ideas that come into your head, right? Probably small, petite, in need of saving, whatever, right? I took everything that I would have figured would be a natural for, I guess, word association, and I flipped it on its head.
Hmm.
So instead of this like 5 foot nothing, little frail nothing, we've got basically Serena Williams with superpowers. So that's kind of how I built that sort of like the characters themselves.
Fitting, and I really like how this team is kind of like a behind the scenes team. Like, do you have like two main personalities for Canada, but you really have this team be the ones that behind the scene that come and actually get dirty, do the work. And I kind of liked how you wrote that in there too. What was some of your reasoning for having them kind of be behind the scenes like that?
Well, I thought, like there are a variety of stereotypes that go along with like Canada, especially like from a U.S. perspective. Like, we're always, very nice and whatever, very nice, very polite. But one of the things that doesn't come up as often, maybe from your perspective, is how often the American trends sort of like swallow us up here. So, like when you look at Toronto, okay, the city of Toronto has got a variety of different things that they have mimicked based off of the United States. So there's the Hollywood Walk of Fame in, Hollywood, California. We have the Canadian Walk of Fame that popped up in Toronto, right? You have Broadway in New York. We have the Theatre District in Toronto as well, right? We have a CFL team in Toronto that isn't very well supported. Why is it not supported? Because Torontonians desperately want an NFL team, right? So it's one of those things. It's like they want to be seen in a very American light, whether they want to admit that or not. They're also desperate to get the Olympics, right? Because every major city, including a variety of different like world-class American cities, have all had the Olympics, right? So Toronto has never had the Olympics, so they desperately want that. So I took that sort of aspect of how we do tend to follow trends and sort of mimic American culture to have the one side of things. So if we saw, say, for instance, a big superhero, surge in popularity in the States, then it would be perfectly reasonable for me that the powers that be here would try and do their own spin on that to try and mimic a certain amount of success. But then, depending on how well that went over, there would still need to be the people that actually did the work. So that's where the team itself came into being.
So were all the heroes in this universe like genetically modified by the government, or were some of them like natural born?
Well, Pulsar is probably, nothing has actually been like really disclosed, but Pulsar was genetically born. That has not been really discussed, but yeah, he was. Polar Knight actually has got sort of more magical origins. I want to try and dip into that in a future issue, but a lot of his powers come from the sword that he has.
Okay.
Okay, so that's now then you've got well, in issue 1 he's called the French Guardian. He's going to be transitioning into Gardien du Québec, the armored mech sort of character. He is guy in a mech suit. So, so in terms of on the team who have been genetically modified, that would be Damsel, Sizem, Recap, and Moose.
Okay. Yeah, and I really thought Recap was an interesting way to have like the exposition, kind of an idea of what was going on in issue 1, having him, touch a dead body to kind of like be able to replay the last few seconds. I thought that was an awesome way to kind of like just bring that exposition in without really, having to dump it. I haven't seen a lot of starts to a story that way either, So what was some of the driving force behind that too? That was a really an interesting way to start off issue 1.
Well, I thought with with Recap also as well, like that that name just sort of came to me, and I started to sort of think about, well, okay, if he like with a name like Recap, what sort of powers would he potentially have? I'd thought like time manipulation or something about that. Well, that's kind of been overdone. Like I was thinking kind of like what is it, Tracer from Overwatch? How she can like jump back in time, or whatever. And I thought, no, that's been overdone. And I started thinking, well, there's like precogs, right? Like those who can like predict the future. Postcog is something that hasn't necessarily been explored too much. So that went sort of naturally with the Recap name there. And when I thought about the story for issue 1 and how I was going to get from sort of point A to point B, again, I wanted to make sure that everybody had their moment, right? And I thought, well, the best way to give him his moment would be to sort of set the scene and sort of show what his sort of role would end up being on the team. Like he's more investigative, he's more semi-reconnaissance, I guess. It's a different sort of reconnaissance, but certainly he was able to give a good deal of an idea of what the threat assessment would end up being. So that was just sort of how I sort of started spinning how he could possibly contribute to the story. But in terms of the story itself, I wanted to make sure that there was a reason for the team to be mobilized in the first place, and without it being the big hole in the sky sort of thing, right? Like that's something that you've got to sort of build up to. And I remember and I mentioned it in the first issue, that the power outage in 2003 that basically knocked out most of Ontario, part of New York, for hours. And what a complete pain that was to deal with. And just the idea of like how we pretty much just ground to a halt because nobody had any electricity at all. And I thought, well, that's something that people haven't actually, done too much about. Like, I felt it was a better option than the generic bank robbery sort of thing, because that's been done to death. And I didn't want to go too high with the stakes right off the bat, because again, it's just a team introduction, right? So I had to sort of build something, and I thought that was a good baseline that would be a significant enough threat to bring the team out, but not a world-breaking threat, or even a country-breaking, city-breaking threat. It was enough to get them out, but not too much that it couldn't be recovered from.
Yeah, I mean, the stakes were high though, because with the power out for months, that would cause chaos. That was put in the comic, and that I think that's 100% true. I forgot what the statistic is, but it's something like if the world is without power it's like the world is like what, 3 or 4 meals away from just complete chaos. Same lines with power. Like it's like a couple of days without power, the world would be in complete anarchy, because without power, you're not able to like keep your food cold. You're not able to withdraw money from ATMs. You're not able to call loved ones. All devices start to die within like a day. Like complete anarchy. Yeah.
Okay, and even just if you look at it, like I'm not sure. Well, up here anyway, there's not a lot of people that go carrying cash anymore, right? There's like everybody's using like automatic debit or like debit cards and stuff like that. So you take out the power, then all of a sudden, like commerce stops.
Yep.
Right. The ability to get goods stops. Right. So then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, yeah, as you're saying, like the like food, water, medical supplies, and the more desperate people get, the more potential for anarchy there ends up being, right? So,
No, absolutely. Real quick, we have Sarah, our good friend, over on YouTube, stopping to say that is a really cool concept for a power and to start things. Talking about recap earlier as well. So, and I really love how we were talking about enough to bring the team out, because in issue 2, we see the team lead make a call thinking that a level 3 was enough for him just to handle, and he quickly finds out that he should have brought in the team for it. I thought that was a really nice kind of way for him to kind of just like think he has it handled, but he quickly finds out that he doesn't.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and that's the thing with Pulsar is he is the most experienced one on the team. Like he's supposed to be, again, sort of like late 30s, early 40s sort of thing, while the rest of the team are basically like early to mid 20s, basically. So he's been around the block, a fair number of times. And what I'd wanted to do with, again, specifically the way I had set up issue 2, we had Sizem getting his moments and getting a little bit more about his backstory sort of thing, but I also had to counterbalance that with Pulsar, who he would feel is responsible for benching him in the first place. So it's that sort of, balancing act there where you've got, again, Sizem griping and then the guy he's griping about. Right?
And I think it's really quick too, because we have the opportunity to look at issue 3, the first couple pages. Thank you so much for that PDF as well. Let's talk about some of the team and some of the other resources that made this comic possible for everyone.
Well, issue 3 specifically was largely possible thanks to the London Arts Council and their 2021 Community Arts Investment Program. What they have is sort of an ongoing yearly budget, I guess, where they invest back into the arts community in our city. So they'll support things like the local Comic Cons, they'll support things like film festivals, they'll support local
That's awesome.
artists, things of that nature. So when I heard about the program, I thought, well, I'm gonna do my pitch to see if I can get some backing for our my comic project here. So I submitted it as an individual, like under the sort of writing category, and they liked my pitch. Without them, it would have been a lot more difficult to get this off the ground, because as I'm sure you realize, producing any sort of independent comic is not cheap. So I wanted to make sure that I got a little bit of help, because I haven't done any crowdfunding up to this point. Like the first 2 issues were paid entirely out of pocket. The third issue was also largely, I was ready to do it entirely out of pocket, but the London Arts Council definitely lightened that burden, which was very nice. And I cannot thank them enough for what they have contributed to specifically issue 3. Now, I would also like to, take an opportunity to thank again my creative team. Stephen Peterson has been the artist, the line artist for all 3 issues so far, and the quality of the artwork continues to increase from one issue to the next, which has been outstanding. In issue 1, I had Gary Scott Beatty, who was doing the colors and letters. He did an outstanding job for us. He definitely gave it a more of a Silver Age sort of feel to it.
I was gonna say it gave me that vibe when I was reading it. Yeah,
which was definitely like I think kind of a nice sort of feel to it, because again, it was kind of a throwback to the newsprint comics that I would have been familiar with growing up. And then from issue 2 and 2 on, so 2 and 3, I had Linda Scott Campbell as the colorist. She has just done an outstanding job, and then Richard Lumsden has been doing our lettering, and he also did the colors for the cover of issue 3, as well as for the pinup series that we've been putting together for when we inevitably do like print runs and things like that, and hopefully Comic-Con appearances, God willing. That's
awesome.
Some pretty solid pinups and stuff to have there at the table as well. And so the creative team across the board from issue 1 to issue 3 has been just fantastic for me to work with, and I can't thank them enough for what they've contributed to the project as a whole.
No, absolutely. And we have Calculus over on YouTube stopping in and say, hey, yo, welcome to the stream, Calculus. How have you been? I think that is the perfect segue. Let's go ahead and check out issue 3, the first couple of pages, and see what all this creative team has put together for us with Project I.M.P.A.C.T issue number 3. So right here we have the cover. So who do we see right here on the cover? And
Okay,
what's going on?
Okay, so we have Damsel, and she is surrounded by Horde and his, well, Hordelings, for lack of a better description. That's,
so he has the power to like manipulate himself and such, or
self-duplication, right?
Okay,
like with the name like Horde, you know, he is his own army, right?
Yeah,
so
that would be a pretty formidable opponent to go up against. First and foremost, just due to his size, but the fact that he can replicate like this is pretty insane.
Yep. So that's yeah. He's another old time favorite of mine. He's been sort of existing in my mind, dating back to the tabletop role playing games since the late '80s as well. So there's our creative team there. So the 2 of us from Ontario, and then 2 of us from British Columbia.
And then, do you want to give a shout out to your comic label as well?
Okay, well, yeah, like we're publishing under the name ADR Comics. We are on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. When it comes to Instagram and Facebook, we're at Project I.M.P.A.C.T Comic, and on Twitter, we're at Impact Comic. Yeah, it's been fun so far. So.
Calculus saying he's preparing to redo a full book. Oh, sounds like you have a full night's work ahead of you. Don't worry though, we'll lend you our smooth talking voices to help you get through that. So here we have the first page. What are we seeing happen on this first page?
Okay, so basically what we have is the introduction of Bob Conway. He is the individual who has come up with this report, or he has reported an incident at his home. Essentially what's happened is that there was a break-in at his house, and some items have been stolen, specifically his sunglasses, his belt with his Screaming Eagle belt buckle, and some silverware. And now he is convinced, of course, that these have been stolen by aliens. So, of course, the team is, well, we got Seisman and Polar Knight there. You can see Polar Knight sort of making notes and whatnot. He's not entirely convinced of. Well, I know for one thing, Seisman is definitely not convinced of the veracity of this man's statements because, well, why on earth would an alien go stealing things like silverware and sunglasses? But of course, Bob is quite convinced because he left through a rip in space and time.
And this would sound crazy diving into this issue for the first time, but with issue 2, you've seen a dragon literally go through a rip in space and time, and it's like, all right, that very well could happen.
Yeah. So then we have again sort of the flashback to weeks ago, and we have an individual from representative of the Hood alien race coming back. As you can see, he's carrying well, I believe that's a football. He's wearing a football helmet, and he's carrying either a small screen TV or a tablet, believing that again that he is returned with spoils from the human world.
And right, quickly finds out that those are not spoils.
Well, it's actually like from his perspective, he's bringing back examples of their culture and their technology, that will help them in their essentially casing the Earth for its viability for their purposes.
I love how detailed this is. Like, holy crap. We have Sarah also saying these pages look so good with a mind-blown emoji, and Calculus saying digging this art. Yeah, this is super detailed. I love how like just well drawn out these panels are.
Yeah, well, Stefan did an outstanding job. That's I think he definitely put a lot more effort into making sure that we really got the setting right. Because again, I think if you don't do enough like background with the the background details and things like that, then you just don't get a feel for where they are, and it I think it impacts the quality of what you end up with.
And right here we have, it looks like some sort of like chapel or almost like a throne of some sort.
Yep, this is the main throne room of the Black Hood. He is the leader of this. He's a warlord, an exiled warlord, um, who is sort of, I guess, the master and commander of this particular vessel, and he lets his minion know rather quickly that he really doesn't care about cultural artifacts, because as far as he was concerned, humans are going to end up just being fodder for his armies anyway. So enough of this nonsense. We're not going to be bringing back any of this crap anymore. So of course, flashing back to present day, and we've got Polar Knight and Sizem discussing, what they just went through, and of course, Sizem being ever the skeptic is, not really believing too much of what was going on, but Polar Knight's sort of trying to convey, well, look, like, not every time that you leave the office is it going to be, some major, crisis or whatever like that. Sometimes part of the job is, again, reassuring the public that they're safe. Right?
Yeah, so and I think that's very important too.
Yeah. So then, of course, when we end up, we got Pulsar and Recap back at the headquarters there, and that's essentially, Sizem goes giving his summary of what had happened, and he mentions the rip in space and time, and Pulsar is like, "Well, hold on, wait a second. Like, next time, lead with that, right? The rip in space and time is, a bit more important than whether or not you believe anything else that's the guy has to say."
So I don't know how much of this you want to keep going through, because you just dropped this in the middle of July, so this is still hot off the press. I'll scroll as much as you want to, but if you want to stop right here, I get that too, because I don't want to spoil too much of the good.
Okay, I think that's probably a good spot. Well, maybe pop down and at least get a chance to see Damsel there. She's setting up her sensory gear at the Tecumseh skate park. So Tecumseh, Ontario is just outside of Windsor, which is actually, I guess it's technically part of Windsor, which is right across the river from Detroit. So it's funny when you actually go to the Tecumseh sort of website. One of the things that they have is a live cam for the skate park. And I remember when I was looking these sort of things up, I'm like, well, wait a second here. Are you trying to tell me that the only thing that you guys have of note going on in this place is a live cam to your skate park? Okay, I guess I know exactly where this thing is starting then.
I love this panel break too with the camera. And real quick, you can see a glimpse, like, it's not all talk and communication. There's going to be some crazy stuff that's going to happen.
Yeah, so that's I think basically everything really takes off pretty much right after this, right? So as soon as the power surge happens, we have ourselves a portal begins to open, and then the fun really begins.
So this was the first couple pages of Project Impact issue number 3. Where can people find this for purchase? I know this is available behind a paywall on Global Comics, but where can are people able to buy the physical, or is it just digital right now?
At this stage, it is just digital. We are investigating the possibility of doing a 3-issue combined sort of mini trade. So that, because we haven't actually done a print run yet of any of these comics, it's all been digital up to this point. But there has been a growing interest in people getting their hands on physical copies. So my thought was package them together in sort of a 3-issue trade volume, just to give sort of people a bit more value for their hard-earned dollar, especially now that we're hitting a recession and whatnot. It's and plus it's easier to store as well. That's so I'm investigating that possibility, but right now it's available on Drive-Thru Comics and on Global Comics. So those are the two exclusive outlets at this point where you can find them.
We have Sarah saying getting the setting right is so important. Super good job doing that with all those details. Yeah, I have to agree. I think the art really speaks for itself with issue 3, and it looks gorgeous, and can't wait to see what happens with the rest of that. It sounds like there's a big throwdown about to happen.
Oh, I think you're going to be impressed. Well, you've got access to the full issue there. It's people who have read it have been genuinely thrilled at the way things go. That's
Hmm.
it's a pretty tight issue overall, I think. And then the art, I can't say enough about what like Stefan and Linda did with the art, and of course like Rich with the lettering. I think Rich has done a good job to not overwhelm the artwork, and he's got all the markings of what you want in a letter, where like the lettering does not knock you out of the story, right? Because the
Hmm.
best letterists are the ones that you don't really notice, right? And I think that his contributions shouldn't be understated. But again, Stefan and Linda have just completely like rocked this issue.
No, that is so awesome. So what's next? I mean, how many issues do you have planned out for this series as a whole?
Well, it's one of those things that like I've been sort of trying to gauge interest one way or the other. Like one of the things I found off the first issue was that doing justice to a cast of characters of 7 is pretty difficult. So I actually took a lot of inspiration from the old John Byrne run of Alpha Flight. The early, I want to say maybe first 10 issues or so, he would have like a main story, like a sort of an A storyline, but then the last like 5 to 10 pages of any of the given books were devoted specifically to like individual character origins to sort of bring readers up to speed as to who these different characters were, because their only other appearance for some of them was like a few panels in one of the X-Men books, right? So
Hmm.
he devoted space to the individual characters, and I thought, well, I had the first issue where it's the broad introduction of the entire team. Well, let's pare it back a bit and focus in a little bit more to give greater character depth to individual characters. So you're seeing a lot more character development and growth for, say, Seism, for instance, and Damsel. So like Damsel had action sequences in issue 2, as well as she's a major player in issue 3. Seism again had his character building moments in issue 2, but also you're starting to get a bit more of an idea of who the guy is in issue 3 as
Hmm.
well. Polar Knight hasn't quite had the exposure that the others have, although he again had action beats in issue 1, and here he has a bit more character beats and sort of conveying who he is as a hero, just in terms of how he's understanding the different situations and what their role is in terms of public PR and whatnot. So
Hmm.
I want to try and sort of be doing things with more individuals or pairs of characters to sort of give people a chance to sort of get to know these characters. And then I also have got a sort of an interlaced story that has been really in the background, but it's still there, that I want to I'm starting to build towards. Like I
Is
know
it like an
definitely
outside Project Impact, or is it in the world?
well, you can actually see it in the beginning, like the last few pages of issues 1 and 2, right? You have the presence of the presence of the Pravis Research Group. Okay,
Hmm.
they're going to become much more significant as things roll along.
Okay.
But in terms of where, like, I know where I want the series to go in terms of the big moments, but I also want to make sure that I don't rush them.
Hmm.
So, like, essentially, I want to make sure that anything that happens as far as major character development ends up being earned, and I really want it to land correctly. And I think if I push it too quickly, like I could very easily do what I want to do in the next issue, but I don't feel that it would have the same like
Impact.
impact, as it were. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's yeah, it wouldn't have the same impact if I rushed it. So I'm
Hmm.
trying to give people a chance to get to know the characters more and sort of hopefully get attached to the characters more. One of the things that is coming up, Rich has been doing, just again to sort of practice and get himself more back into the comic swing of things, is he's been working on a small like 4 or 5 page Moose mini story. So I'm trying to sort of like build these extra little things here and there, to try and I just build up character attachment.
Yeah.
There is also another character that I am debating about spinning out. Like he is eventually going to spin out from the Impact book itself, but I'm not sure whether or not he will be like the next thing that I do, or whether or not I'll move directly to issue 4. So I'm kind of deciding on that. And essentially, you'll once you finish issue 3, you'll know what I'm talking about. as far as where I'm potentially spinning things out to. Um, but that's sort of the. I don't have a set issue number in mind. It's just a matter of I want to make sure that I've done the characters justice, so that when the big stuff happens, it really lands.
Absolutely. I think that is I think that's a smart way to go about it. And there's no need to rush. You got nothing but time and issues to get written out and planned out. So I think with that being said, this would be a perfect time for us to begin wrapping things up. Before we go, Alan, I always love asking one question in particular, because as much as this is a show where we really promote you and your book, it's also a nice learning platform for anyone new that might be watching. So with that being said, for anyone who might be interested in getting started, or maybe they have already started but they're just stuck getting going, what type of advice would you offer them to help them just kind of break through that barrier?
Well, first, and probably the biggest one, and this goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier. One of the bigger challenges when it comes to indie comics in particular is the money aspect of things. And one of the underexplored areas ends up being local arts associations and grants and possible opportunities such as that. Like, again, if you've got yourself local arts councils and things like that, whether it be, again, like municipal, state, county, whatever, in my case, city, provincial, whatever, right? See if there's something out there that will help you along the way. Because again, we can't do this all on our own. That's why so many creators go opting for crowdfunding. And like, especially if you are a predominantly a writer and you want to bring your stuff to, well, the public, it's going to take money, right? Like, there are some people who are slick enough to play the whole, I'll give you like residual whatever, like once we make back a certain amount. Well, there's no guarantee in that, right? And as far as I'm concerned, everybody's time is valuable, right?
Yeah,
so
I agree.
My creative teams have all been compensated before the first book has even like left in terms of like release, right? They've all been paid, right? So there's nobody. I'm not waiting on extra funds to come in so that I can fill out my IOUs or whatever. Like, that's so I think explore what your resources happen to be. Okay, there are going to be different granting agencies, especially in the States. You guys seem to have a lot more variety in terms of like foundations and government grants, things of that nature. And like, if you look into things where they're investing back into the arts, right, explore those options as thoroughly as you can and throw your name in, right, because you never know what's going to happen.
No, that is awesome. I never would have guessed to look into that type of thing, and I think that piece of advice could definitely help someone, especially if you get a grant that could definitely help save a couple hundred, a couple thousand, depending on what that grant is for, out of your own pocket. So I think you need to really explore those resources that are at hand. Alan, thank you so much for coming on here, breaking down Project Impact and everything in between. This has been such an awesome podcast. Real quick, where can everyone find you at? Once again, your social media handles.
Okay, well, on Twitter, it's Impact Comic. So now, not Impact Comics, because I believe that's a different thing entirely, but Impact Comic is our main handle there. On Instagram, it is Project Impact Comic. And on Facebook, again, Project Impact Comic. We do have a link tree. It would be so link tr.ee/Project Impact Comic. That will give you all of the access to all of our different social medias, as well as how to get our books.
No, absolutely. Well, you guys heard it here, and you heard it here in the flesh. Alan, thank you so much for stopping by. This has been an awesome Monday night. I hope you guys are all having a beautiful time, but most importantly, keep it geekly.